Hello and welcome back. We're going to be walking through Castle Ensis. So if you're new and this walkthrough helps you out, don't forget to subscribe. So this first intro area is fairly simple. The path forward is straight ahead, but we're going to cut off to the right into this optional area where we're going to come across a kind of future teaser enemy. He's not too tough. Defeating him gives you an opportunity to get some of the items that he's using. After you take him out, you'll want to explore the area. There's some miscellaneous items to pick up. If you walk off to this edge over here, you'll be able to look at two different areas. One of them up top is an area that you'll be getting to in just a second, while the other area is a separate location. It kind of seems like it's a part of the dungeon, but it's going to be its own completely separate area, so don't worry about that for now. We'll just go ahead and walk up these steps. You'll see an item that we'll be able to drop down to later on, but once we round this corner, there's going to be enemies to the left and to the right. It's going to be two of them a piece, so I recommend just using a high damage dealing weapon and going off to the right. You can prioritize whoever you want. I just tend to go for the dog because it's kind of right there. But once you take them out, you'll want to do a 180 and you'll find two more enemies. This one's a little bit more tricky because the guy that's leading is a spear enemy, so he definitely has a lot of range and he can kind of hit you into a staggered phase. If you can, try to split them apart because once they're together, they can do combo attacks that are pretty dangerous. And even more so if you happen to attract all four of them at the same time. So once we defeat all the enemies, we'll walk up the steps and we'll come across this tower with a ladder on it. Once you climb up the ladder, you'll find the chest containing Milady. Now, this is an item that could really help you with this area, so it's up to you on whether or not you should go back and upgrade it. I did, and I thought it was worth it. The weapon art Impaling thrust pierces shields, and that's really helpful with some of the shielded Black Knights that you'll come across later on in this area. One of them is actually pretty soon. So again, it's completely up to you on whether you want to upgrade it. But as we continue forward, I'm going to equip it so that way you guys can check it out. And again, it's going to be really helpful with this next section because once you look up and ahead, you should find the Black Knight. Before you provoke him, I would recommend going off into the right where you'll come across two light enemies. Just take them out quickly and then focus your attention on the Black Knight. Now, what I recommend doing here is just using the weapon art. You should get a stagger pretty quickly, which will let you get a critical hit, and then you should be able to just follow it up pretty quickly as well from there. This weapon definitely does help out with fighting the Black Knight enemies, so again, this is something that I would recommend upgrading. Now you'll be able to see the Miquella's cross up ahead, and then a gate which should be locked, but before we go up there, we're going to go off into this side area where we'll come across another chest, and inside this chest you'll find the Loyal Knight's Cookbook. This is going to let you craft royal magic grease items, so it's pretty helpful. Make sure to pick that up. Once we exit the room, we're going to do two things before we rest at the site of grace. The first one is we're going to run up this hill just slightly until we find this little path down. You should find an item, but obviously this is going to be a trap, so right around the corner, as you can see, there's a dog enemy. Just make sure you take him out before you pick up the item. On your way out, we're going to go left back down the hill, somewhat towards where those enemies were, and we're going to look off to the left. You'll be able to see an item that we can drop down to. This is the item that we saw earlier, so make sure you pick that up as well. And then we're going to make our way back to the location that we were just at. Now that we've made our way back here, we'll go ahead and go back up. When you get to Miquella's Cross, you'll find the Castle Cross message from Needle Knight Leda. Go ahead and read it a little. It's an interesting piece of lore that you'll get, so just be sure to check that out once you pick it up. After you rest, continue forward. The gate to the left will be locked, and the way to unlock it is to continue forward towards the Torch Knight. He's kind of that visual cue on where to go. So once you defeat him, you'll see that there are some levels that you can drop down. Drop down the first 2 levels, and before you jump into this hole, just be careful. There's a pack of dogs here, and they can swarm you pretty easily. So once you just drop down, just try to pick them off one at a time and avoid being surrounded. Try using a high damage dealing weapon and you should be okay. But once you clear them out, we'll be able to progress forward, where we'll come across a split path. Now, this is one of those times where I enjoy just soaking up the environment, because this non-hostile enemy kind of tells you the 2 directions where you can go. It points you to this optional area, which if you'll explore, you'll find some miscellaneous items. You'll also get a view of the beginning area where you first entered into Castle Ensis. And then once you're finished with this section, we'll just jump back across and run along this path where we'll go into the second area where he kind of leads you down. This is pretty cool, but it's also kind of dangerous. The way forward is by jumping on these rocks. So you kind of want to get a running start, but then at the same time, you just want to be careful as you scale up. And you should be able to get to the top of the waterfall somewhat easily. Now that we're in this area, we'll see that to the left is a ladder. This is going to take us further into the area. And then you'll find some miscellaneous items, including the knot resin that you'll find behind this waterfall area. So once you pick up those items, we'll go ahead and make our way up towards this ladder. Now, once we reach the top, there will be a doorway with some enemies inside. One of them is in your face, and then the other one is off and to the left. So make sure you take him out first, because he could sneak up on you. And then the enemy that is left is a spear knight. So again, just be mindful of the range and the damage and the ability to stagger that he has, because he can be a pretty dangerous enemy. Once we defeat these 2, we'll come across this doorway, and if we go straight, we'll be able to unlock the shortcut for the gate. So now we finally unlocked that gate, and we're back at that first site of grace. So you can rest up here if you need to. Next, we'll go up these steps onto a bridge, and you'll come across 4 enemies. They're going to be split into 2 groups of 2. And once you get close to that first set of 2, it's going to trigger the second set. So just be mindful of that. They have a ranged enemy over there. So if it helps you to kind of kite them back down the steps, I recommend doing that. So just take your time. Make sure you take them out one by one, and also avoid those ranged attacks. Other than that, they should be relatively easy to take out. They don't deal a whole lot of damage. It's just the fact that they can gang up on you is what makes them dangerous. And if we cut off to the left, we'll be able to see the base of the area. We'll be able to see an area that we were just at where we climbed up the ladder. So we'll just turn around and continue onwards. Once we get to this torch area, be careful, because there is another dog enemy that's kind of off into the bushes, and this one is hidden really well. You can barely see him. You can only see kind of his movement slightly. But the unique thing about this enemy is that he is a bigger dog than the ones that we previously fought. So he'll have a little bit more health than the other ones, but as long as you know to anticipate him, he should be pretty easy to take out. This next section is going to be a little tricky, because you'll see that there's a mage ranged enemy that's up top, but then there's also 2 more that are hiding here at this base level. So you can see one up here just right in front of me, but there is another one, and as you can see right there, it's really easy to get hit multiple times really quickly. So I recommend just staying on the move. If you can't find the one, or you can't track down the one that's on the floor, you can go ahead and just run right around this corner. and climb up this ladder. Just one thing to keep in mind though, we're headed towards the magic ranged enemy, but there is another one that's up here as well. So as you can see, those crossbow bolts were firing. Just make sure to anticipate him when you get up here and take him out before jumping down and taking out this ranged opponent. Now it should be a little bit better. That's messed up. Now it should be a little easier to track down this one guy that's down here, and this is something that I recommend doing. I recommend taking out all of these guys, because once you do that, we'll climb up these steps and we'll come across a Carian Knight warrior. This guy is really tough, and the last thing that you need is ranged opponents bugging you while you're fighting this guy. He has a great sword, and trading hits with him is something that you don't want to do. He takes off massive chunks of health, and he also has one healing charge as well. So all of this stuff is things that you're going to want to keep in mind before you engage with him. I definitely recommend taking out these ranged enemies first. But before we even fight him, we're going to go off into this branching area where we'll go down some steps. We'll see an item that we'll get to later. It's going to be a sorcery. But as we go down the steps, we'll take a left and we'll come across a chest. This chest contains the Wolf Crest Shield, which has high sorcery resistance, and it also doesn't have any skills, so you're still going to be able to use the weapon art that your main weapon uses. This item, along with Milady, are items that can help you throughout this area. Milady with the shield enemies, and the Wolf Crest Shield with all the other sorcery attacks that you might encounter, including the boss fight sorceries. So once you pick up this item, we'll make our way back up the steps, and you do have an option to sneak off into this side entrance. If you walk, he shouldn't detect you, and so from here you have two choices. You can either continue on into the chapel, where you'll find Rana's Cameo, which is kind of accurately named because this is going to be the boss that you fight later on, so this is kind of like the Cameo. I don't recommend doing this because this is going to sandwich you between another enemy that's right off into this next room, a sorcery enemy, so I don't recommend doing this. Instead, take on the Carian Knight in the open battlefield. Make sure you take out those ranged opponents, and if nothing else, you can use the entrance and the building as kind of a way to run around and avoid some of his attacks. My strategy definitely involved that, and my actual fight with the Carian Knight was crazy. I mean, the way that it just progressed was pretty intense, and so all in all, it was a really cool fight. And if you want, here are some clips from my fight with him. Defeating the Carian Knight will give you the Moonrithryll's Knight's Sword. If you look at the weapon description for Moonrithryll's Knight's Sword, you'll see that she was also a friend to the trolls who served the royal family. That's kind of a teaser for what you'll encounter later on, and it wasn't something that I noticed right away. Definitely a cool item, but now we're going to progress forward. And we're going to go ahead and assume that you fought the Carian Knight in an open area. So once we enter into the chapel, and if you haven't picked up the talisman already, make sure you pick that up. We'll go ahead and go into this next section where we'll fight a sorcery enemy. Now, once we take him out, don't run all the way down the room just yet. Make sure you look off into the right, and you'll find a room where you'll find another sorcery enemy. If you don't take out this guy, there is a chance that they'll gang up on you later on. So I recommend just going ahead and taking him out right now. Once you exit the room, we're going to go right and then immediately go left, where we'll see some steps and another enemy. So we should take him out pretty easily now that we're not worried about a surprise attack. And once we get to the steps and get to the entrance, we will see another ranged opponent in the far off distance. I recommend just running straight towards him, making sure that you dodge any attacks that he's launching out. And in order for us to get to him, we'll just turn around and we'll open up this gate. Use this left pillar as cover, and we'll find an area to drop down. Right now we're headed towards that ranged magic opponent, but keep in mind that as we're making our way up, there's actually another enemy that's up here with him, and we'll just look off to the left. It's a crossbow enemy. You can kind of prioritize who you think you should attack first here. Sometimes I attack the crossbow enemy, other times I go straight for the ranged opponent, and this time around I just so happen to do that. So make sure you take them both out, and then we'll start dropping down to some optional areas. So as you explore the rooftops, you'll find some miscellaneous items, but the key one that you want to get is when you drop down here. This will take you back to where you found the Wolf Crest Shield and where you fought the Carian Knight, and you'll pick up the Glintblade Trio sorcery. It requires 28 intelligence and it fires 3 projectiles. So once you pick up that item, you'll drop back down and you'll have to run back to where you were before. But now that you've taken out the ranged enemy, you can go ahead and pick up the miscellaneous item that you see on the steps. So we'll continue back out the gate and further into the Legacy Dungeon. Once we cut left, we'll see an enemy. Now this is one of many, so make sure you keep your guard up, take him out, and as we walk further down, we'll have 2 pathways that we can go down. One is down some steps, which as you can see clearly contains multiple enemies, and then the one we're going to go down is this left path. It's also dangerous because it's hiding an enemy behind these boxes, so I recommend switching to a high damage dealing weapon. And once you take out this sitting enemy, I recommend also just sitting here and waiting. What's going to happen is they're going to start splitting up, and it's going to make it easier to take them out one by one. So once you see one of them getting to the top of the steps, just run towards him, take him out, and then run right back along this elevated section. Just keep an eye out for how these enemies are moving. If you have to drop down, just be careful. Take out the dogs if you can, because they're the ones who can give you the most trouble by swarming you. And then if you need to run back up the steps to get a higher elevation, then go for it. Just make sure that you're really careful. Hopefully they split up for you like they did for me. But if not, just use your environment to kind of provide some extra defense. And once you take them out, we'll just continue forward and we'll come across this spiraling staircase. Now, let's be careful because there's an enemy right there waiting for you. It's really easy to get knocked off right here, so that would suck. Just make sure you take him out and then continue forward. You'll come across another Black Knight, but before we fight him, we're going to turn left into this room where we'll come across a chest containing the Imbued sword key. This is going to be helpful after we defeat the boss in this area because it's going to unlock a portal to the ancient ruins of Ra. So now that we've picked up that item, we're going to switch back to Milady if you have that, and we're going to take out this Black Knight here. Again, same deal. We're going to just spam Impaling Thrust. We're going to try to avoid his moves, and then hopefully we trigger a stagger fairly quickly. So once we get that, we'll land a critical hit, and this Black Knight guards an elevator to the final site of grace right before Rana. So we'll just ride that up. And once we get to the top, I recommend sending it back down because we're going to need it in just a second. You should see the golden fog door as soon as you enter into this section, and then we'll cut off to the right where we'll find the site of grace. And before we fight Rana, we're going to take another optional path. So going up these steps will take us to the boss, but we're going to go out this door and jump down this railing. This is going to lead us to an outside area where we continue to just drop down, and then we'll find a tower with a ladder to climb up. There's not much to this outside area. If you explore the edges, you'll see future locations that you'll go to, but for now we'll just go inside the tower. We'll walk up these steps. We'll come across one entrance, but we're not going to go out of that one just yet. Instead, we're going to climb up this ladder and we're going to go to the very top of this tower where we'll find another chest. And in that chest, you'll find the Wind Stance Ash of War. Using this Ash of War will give your weapon the quality affinity, and while you're in the stance, using a normal attack will trigger 3 rapid slashes in combination. If you use a strong attack, it will trigger a leaping thrust. So this is going to be useful for all light greatswords, including Milady. For now, I recommend keeping Impaling Thrust, but that's completely up to you. And once we loot the chest, we'll just drop down. And this is going to be the quickest route back to that initial exit that we were going to go out of, but instead we climbed up the ladder. So now we're back at this entrance, and we'll just keep walking forward. As we get to the edge, we'll find an area that we can just drop down. And when we finally reach the last section, you'll find that we're in the same location where we fought that Black Knight who was guarding the elevator. And just as a quick aside, fighting these Black Knights will give you the opportunity to get their armor. So if you like what they're wearing, make sure you farm them up and see if you can get their armor pieces. So we'll go ahead and ride the elevator back up, and now we're ready to fight Rana. I'll have a separate video detailing what you should do when you fight this boss. Really cool, pretty tricky, but once you get the hang of this boss, they're gonna be pretty easy for you. So we'll pick back up as if you just took out this boss first try, and now we'll exit out into the Skidoo Altis. If you look to the right, you'll come across a side of grace with some NPCs and a Miquella's cross, so make sure you do what you need to do here. And we're going to go ahead and explore some optional areas that we weren't able to when we first got to Castle Ensis. So from that side of grace, we're going to head northwest. And if we look down, we'll see a troll who is using the same weapon, or a very similar weapon, to Moonrithryll's Night Sword. And it would make sense going off the lore from this weapon's description, because it seems that Moonrithyll was friends with the trolls. So really cool to see. This enemy only spawns in once, so once you defeat it, it won't ever come back again. The main tactic here is to just hit the legs until it falls down, and then just continue attacking from there. Once you defeat this enemy, we'll continue south and we'll make our way up here to this tower. This is where we're going to use the imbued key that we found. Using this key will unlock a portal that will lead us into the ancient ruins of Ra. Now, it's optional if you want to go ahead and explore this area now, but I will say that if you continue forward, you'll come across a golden bird looking knight enemy. Pretty tough, so again, you may want to consider coming back. For the sake of this video, I'm going to assume that we did come back and we're going to continue from the portal area. We have two options on where to go from here. For now, we're going to continue east and we're going to just drop down. Don't worry about fall damage from this height. You'll take a little bit, but it's not going to be too much. Once we get to this waterfall, there's two paths we can go. We can either go left, which we're not going to go, and instead we're going to go right. If we drop down to the left, it's just going to take us to the main dungeon with nothing extra to find. But if we go off to the right, we'll find this item right here that's near the pillar before dropping down back into Castle Ensis. Explore this section until you find this chest right here that contains the Carian sorcery sword, and this is kind of like the sister sword to Milady. If you have the intelligence, I definitely would recommend dual wielding them both just because it looks pretty cool. And you may think that this is all that we have left to explore, but there is one other little hidden area once we jump on top of this tent-like section. It'll let us jump on the railing of these walls, and when we get to this pillar here, we're going to jump across. I don't recommend running because I think it's going to take you a little further than you'd like. All you have to do is just walk off and jump. Just make sure you time it pretty good and you should be okay. And we're also going to make that same jump here. Making the jump across will allow you to get the starlight shards and a couple more items. And then from here, you can either turn around and go back to the first site of grace near Miquella's cross and the locked gate, or you can go this way where it'll take you closer to where that waterfall was, where we were jumping on the rocks to get up. So from here, it's really your choice. So that's the first path that we can take from this portal. I'll go ahead and briefly talk about the second. So we went east and now we're going to head north. Just until we get to this section here that's going to allow us to escape kind of this little bowl that we're in. So once we get here, we'll shift and we'll start migrating west, and it shouldn't be too far now until we find the site of grace for us to rest at. So just keep heading west, start shifting south, and then you should come across the Skadu Altus West site of grace. So from here, I'm going to show you the entrance to an optional area. I won't go over that area in this video, but if we get to 100 likes, then I'll go ahead and make a separate one detailing on what to do when you get here. But to get to this optional area, all we need to do is just start dropping down. Be careful, but for the most part, you shouldn't really take any damage. Once you drop all the way down, you'll enter into Fog Rift Fort, where you'll encounter a lot of tough enemies, some pretty cool items, and a mini boss. But for the most part, that's going to go ahead and wrap up this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.